40 minutes is a long time to sit alone at a table for two. Long enough to memorize the menu. Long enough to notice the candle is the fake kind, a little plastic flame that never flickers. Long enough for the waiter to walk by 3 times, and each time his face does that thing. That soft, careful thing people do when they've decided to feel sorry for you. The third pass, he refilled my water. I hadn't touched it. He topped it off anyway, like the glass being full might make me look less like a man who'd been stood up. I said thanks. He said, no rush at all, in the gentlest voice, and somehow that was worse than if he'd just told me the truth. My name is Daniel Hart. I'm 36. I fix and rebuild pianos for a living, which is a stranger job than it sounds, in a town called Millbrook where there are more churches than stoplights. Old uprights, mostly. Grandmother's pianos with keys the color of weak tea. I spend my days inside the guts of instruments nobody plays anymore, tightening what came loose, and I'm good at it, and it's quiet, and quiet has always suited me. That last part is the problem, if you want to know. 2 years ago, my wife left. It wasn't dramatic. There was no other man, no screaming, no plates against the wall. She just sat me down one Sunday and said she'd been unhappy for longer than she knew how to explain. And I remember thinking the strangest thing. I remember thinking so had I, and neither of us had said a word. She packed slowly. That was the part that got me. If she'd been angry, she'd have thrown things in a bag. Instead, she folded everything. Took 2 weeks. And I learned something in those 2 weeks that I never quite unlearned. I learned to expect the door to stay shut. You know that feeling when someone says they'll call, and you already know they won't. You don't even wait by the phone anymore. You just move the phone to the other room so you can't watch it not ring. That became my whole way of being. Braced. Ready for the no before anyone offered it. So sitting there 40 minutes deep, I wasn't surprised. That's the honest truth. Some small, ugly part of me was almost relieved. See, I told myself. This is what happens. This is the shape of things. Her name was Nora. A friend of a friend had set it up. A woman named Priya who works at the coffee place and has decided my loneliness is a group project. She's kind, Priya kept saying. You're both so kind. It's almost annoying. I'd let her talk me into it the way you let the tide take a shoe. I'd shown up early. That's the embarrassing part. I got there at 7 for a 7:15 because being early felt like the polite version of hoping. 7:15 came and went. Then 7:30 slid past 2. By 7:45, I had stopped checking the door. I'd rehearsed excuses for her, which is a thing lonely people do. We write other people's apologies before they even need them. Traffic, maybe. A flat tire. A work thing that ran long. I gave her a whole imaginary life full of good reasons, because the alternative was admitting she'd looked me up, thought about it, and decided a quiet night at home beat a night with me. Around 7:40, I nearly texted Priya to ask if she'd heard anything. I typed it out. Deleted it. Typed it again. Because the moment you send that text, you've admitted you're worried, and worry is just hope with the lights off, and I'd promised myself I was done with both. I put the phone face down. Then I turned it over. Then I put it face down again. I started composing the message I'd send Priya instead, the after message, the one for when it was official. Something breezy. Something that said I'm fine so she wouldn't worry, so nobody would have to feel bad about the piano man eating alone. The bread had come and gone. I'd eaten the whole basket, one slice at a time, tearing each piece smaller so I'd have something to do with my hands. There's a particular skill to looking busy alone at a restaurant. You reread the drink list. You examine the salt shaker like it owes you money. You check your phone even though nobody has texted, and then you set it face down, and then you turn it over again 30 seconds later, in case the world changed while you weren't looking. It hadn't. The table felt like an accusation. 2 chairs. One of them empty in that specific way an empty chair gets when it's supposed to have a person in it. The people around me were on dates that were working. A couple by the window kept leaning in and laughing. I hated them a little. Not really, but a little. There was an older pair near the back who'd clearly done this 1,000 times, not talking much, just eating, comfortable in the not talking. That was the table I envied. That's the whole game, isn't it? To get old with somebody and run out of things to say and have it feel like peace instead of an ending. I put a 10 under the water glass to hold it flat. Then I thought better of it, because who leaves before the person even shows, and I picked the 10 back up. Then I set it down again. I was negotiating with myself, which is what 40 minutes will do to a person. I reached for my jacket off the back of the chair. I'd decided. I was going to leave the 10 for the water and the bread, and I was going to walk to my truck, and I was going to drive home the long way past the reservoir so I could pretend I'd gone somewhere. I had my hand on the sleeve, and that's when the door opened. I didn't look up right away. You stop looking up after a while. But there was this rush of cold air, and a bell over the door, and a voice saying, "Sorry, sorry, sorry," in a string like the word had come untied. I looked up. She was still in her coat, one arm halfway out of it, hair pushed back like she'd run from the parking lot. Cheeks pink from the cold. And she was scanning the room fast, panic in it. The way you look for something you're afraid is already gone. Her eyes found the empty chair across from me. Then they found me. And then they dropped. Down and to the side. To the small hand she was holding. There was a little girl beside her. Maybe 5. 6, tops. Wearing a puffy purple coat 2 sizes too big and a pair of light-up sneakers, and holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear and looking up at the whole restaurant with the flat, unimpressed expression only very small children can manage. Nora looked back at me, and I watched her whole face brace. I know that face. I've worn that face. It's the face of someone waiting for a door to shut. "I am so sorry," she said, coming over fast, still tangled in her coat. "I'm so late, I know. The sitter canceled 40 minutes ago. Her mom got called into the hospital and I couldn't find anyone and I almost..." She stopped. Swallowed. "I almost just texted you and stayed home." "Okay," I said. Which is a stupid thing to say. But it was the true thing. "I had it all typed out," she said. The text. Saying let's reschedule. And then I thought, that's a lie. I'm not going to reschedule. I'm going to chicken out, and then I'll spend a week being mad at myself. She let out a breath that shook a little. "So I brought her." "Which I know you didn't sign up for. I know a kid isn't what you agreed to when Priya." She didn't finish it. She just gestured helplessly at the little girl as if to say, "Well, here's the truth, standing right here in light-up shoes." The girl looked up at me. Sized me up. Then looked away, bored, and pulled at her mother's hand. And I understood something, sitting there. I understood exactly what Nora was doing, because I'd have done the same. She'd walked in already apologizing for her own child. Already braced for me to see the kid and decide this was too much, too complicated, not what I'd ordered. She had one foot pointed at the door. She was giving me the exit before I could take it, so it would hurt a little less when I did. I've spent 2 years learning what a braced person looks like. And I was looking at one. So I stood up. I don't know exactly what I was thinking. Maybe I wasn't thinking. Maybe for once in 2 years I just did the thing before the fear could talk me out of it. I stepped around the table, and I pulled out the chair on the end. The third chair. And I said, to the little girl, "This one's got the best view of the kitchen. You can watch them light stuff on fire." The girl considered this with deep suspicion. "Do they really light stuff on fire?" "Sometimes," I said. "It's a whole show. You have to watch close or you miss it." She looked at her mother. Her mother looked at me like I'd said something in a language she'd stopped expecting to hear. "Sit," I said to Nora. "Softer. Please. You ran here. Sit down." For a second she didn't move. Her eyes were doing something quick and wet, and she blinked it back hard. The way you do when crying at a restaurant is absolutely not on the schedule. She set her bag down. She helped the girl out of the purple coat, one arm, then the other, and the girl climbed into the third chair and immediately got up on her knees to see over the table. "This is Lily," Nora said. "Lily, this is Mr. Daniel," I said. "Just Daniel." Lily didn't say hi. She had already found something better. The paper placemat in front of her, cream-colored, printed with a border of little vines. And in the mug of pencils and stubby crayons the restaurant kept on the table for exactly this reason, a fat red crayon. She pulled the placemat closer with both hands. Claimed it. Smoothed it flat with her palm like a woman about to sign something important. Picked up the red crayon and held it in her fist the way kids do, the whole hand wrapped around it. And she started to draw. Nora watched her for a second, then looked at me, and there was this laugh caught in her throat that didn't quite make it out. She does this, she said. Anywhere there's paper. Restaurants. Church. The back of the electric bill, one time. Good, I said. Keeps her out of trouble. You'd think. Nora finally sat down. She pushed her hair back again. Her hands weren't quite steady. I noticed that. I notice hands. It's the job. And I noticed she kept them under the table where she thought I couldn't see, the way you hide something you don't want examined. I really am sorry, she said again, quieter, now that she was sitting. About all of it. The lateness. She glanced at Lily. The +1. I've been sitting here 40 minutes convinced you weren't coming, I said. You showing up at all is the best thing that's happened to me today. The +1's a bonus, Das. She looked at me for a long moment, trying to figure out if I meant it. That's the thing about people who've been left. We can't tell the difference between kindness and a setup anymore. We've been fooled by our own hope too many times. Most of the men I've told about her, she started, and then she caught herself and shook her head and picked up the menu instead. But I'd heard the beginning of it. I knew how that sentence ended. Most of the men I've told about her stopped texting back. She didn't have to say it. It was written all over the way she was sitting, close to the edge of the chair, ready to leave. Lily, without looking up from her drawing, said, "Are you the piano man?" I glanced at Nora. She'd told the kid about me. Some small warm thing turned over in my chest at that. "I am," I said. "I fix pianos." "Do you play them too?" "A little. Badly." Lily nodded, satisfied, filing this away, and went back to her red crayon. She was drawing hard, pressing so the wax went shiny. I could see shapes starting. A line across the bottom. Some stick shape standing on it. I couldn't tell what yet. She had one arm curled around the top of the paper, guarding it, the universal posture of an artist who is not ready for you to see. I didn't ask what it was. "You don't rush that. What do you like on a burger?" I asked her instead. "Because I'm about to order one, and I'm gonna need a second opinion." Lily looked up like this was the most serious question anyone had asked her all week. "Just cheese," she said. "No green stuff. And they have to cut it in half or it's too big." "Cut in half," I said. "Copy that. You want fries, or you want the fancy ones with the little bits on them?" "The regular ones." "The fancy ones lie." I laughed, actually laughed, the first real one all night, and across the table Nora's shoulders came down about an inch. Just an inch. But I saw it. "She's not usually this quiet," Nora said. "Give it 10 minutes. "I like quiet," I said. "It's kind of my whole thing." That got a real smile out of her. Small, tired, but real. And I thought absurdly that I would do a great deal to see that again. I braced for it anyway. Old habit. I sat there half waiting for the other shoe, for the moment this got complicated, for the moment she remembered she had a whole life and a whole child, and no room in either for a man who talks to pianos. I waited for the night to end. That's what I do. I wait for the door. Then the waiter came back around, the same one, the pity gone from his face now, replaced by something almost like relief on my behalf. He looked at the little girl on her knees drawing in red, and at Nora settling in across from me, and he didn't say a word about the wait or the water or any of it. He just reached into his apron and set a third menu down on the table. The third menu just sat there for a second, cream and folded, like a small permission. Nobody moved to open it right away. Lily was still on her knees, guarding her placement with one arm, red crayon going. Nora reached for a menu, then stopped, then reached again, and I realized she was watching me watch her kid. Waiting to see where my eyes landed. Waiting for the flinch. I picked up my own menu instead and gave her the room. "Okay," I said. "Serious question. The mac and cheese here. Is it a real mac and cheese, or is it the kind that shows up in a little cast iron pan and costs $18 and has a name?" Lily's head came up. "It has a name," she said gravely. "It's called truffle." "That's the one that lies," I said. "That's the one that lies," she agreed, and went back to drawing, having settled the matter. Nora laughed, quick and surprised, the sound a person makes when a laugh gets out before they've cleared it. She put a hand over her mouth like she'd embarrassed herself. I filed that away too. A woman who apologizes for her own laughing has learned somewhere that taking up space costs her. The waiter came for the order. Lily got a cheeseburger, plain, cut in half, regular fries, And she informed the man of all three conditions herself, chin up, meeting his eyes, and he wrote it down like she was any other patron with strong opinions, which is exactly how you should take a 5-year-old's order. She watched to make sure he wrote it. Then she nodded once, dismissing him, and picked her crayon back up. "She's very thorough," I said. "She gets it from her father," Nora said, and then her face did a small thing, a quick tightening around the eyes, and she added, lighter, "The thoroughness. Not the rest." I didn't ask about the rest. You don't, not 40 minutes into a first anything. But I noticed how she'd put a wall up and painted a joke on it, because I do the same. It's a decent trick. Say the hard thing in a voice that says don't worry about it. For the record, I said, I do a lot of my best work with an audience of one very honest critic. So Lily's welcome to consult on my burger. Lily, without looking up, said, "You should get bacon." "See, that's a strong note." "Bacon on everything," she said. "Except ice cream. My mom won't let me try it on ice cream." "Your mom is protecting you," I said. "Bacon on ice cream is a trap." "That's what she says," Lily said, deeply betrayed by the adult consensus, and Nora and I looked at each other over the top of her head, and something passed between us that I hadn't felt in a long time. Something quiet. The feeling of being on the same side of a small joke. A team of two, formed by accident, in the space above a kid's drawing. We talked. It came easier than it should have. She told me she was a pediatric nurse nights mostly. Which is why the sitter thing was such a knife, because her whole life ran on a schedule held together with other people's kindness. She said it plainly, no violin behind it. She works the children's ward, she said. The long dark hours when the little ones spike fevers and their parents finally sleep in the plastic chairs, and somebody has to sit up with the machines and the monitors and hold a small hand until morning. When you work nights and you're the only grown-up at home too, a canceled sitter isn't an inconvenience. It's the floor dropping out. I told her about the pianos, the grandmothers, the keys the color of weak tea, and she asked good questions, real ones, the kind where you can tell somebody's paying attention and not just loading up the next thing they want to say. At one point she said, "So you spend all day fixing things nobody plays?" "Pretty much." "Doesn't that make you sad?" I thought about it. Nobody had asked me that. "It used to feel like that," I said. "Now I think of it more like, somebody loved this thing once. Somebody's mother sat at it every Sunday. And it's just gummed up and out of tune, and it thinks it's done. And it's not done. It just needs somebody to open it up and be patient and not give up on it halfway." I heard myself say it. I heard how it sounded. So did she. Neither of us pointed at it, but her eyes changed, went soft and careful, and she looked down at the table like the moment had gotten a size too big. "Anyway," I said, "most of them just need a good cleaning." She let me off the hook. "So do most of us," she said. Across from us, Lily had built a whole civilization on that placemat in red wax. I could see it forming now if I looked sideways, which I did, careful not to lean over her work. A line for the ground. A rectangle in the middle. Some shapes standing around it. She was concentrating so hard, her tongue was out the corner of her mouth. My phone buzzed in my jacket. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the name and I almost laughed, because the universe has a sense of timing. It was my brother-in-law Marcus, or former brother-in-law, technically, though nobody's ever told me the correct word for the husband of your ex-wife's sister. When the divorce happened, my wife took the house and the good pans and most of the friends, and I got, somehow in the settlement nobody wrote down Marcus. He married my ex-wife's little sister Dana 11 years ago, and Dana came with a boy from before, a kid named Theo who was 4 at the wedding and is 15 now and taller than both of us. There's a whole family over there that I married into, and technically married out of, and none of them seem to have gotten the memo that I'm supposed to be gone. The text said, "He made varsity." Thought you'd want to know. He's asking if Uncle Danny can come to the game. Uncle Danny. Theo has called me that since he could talk. When my marriage fell apart, I figured that was one more thing I'd lose. The kid who wasn't even mine by blood. The nephew I got through a marriage that no longer existed. So I braced for it the way I brace for everything. Waiting for the day Marcus would gently let me drift, because that's the tidy thing, that's what people do. But Marcus never blinked. He just kept texting me box scores and asking me to fix Dana's mother's spinet, kept a chair for me at Sunday dinners on his side of the family that on paper wasn't mine anymore. I'd asked him about it once, why he bothered, why he kept a divorced almost relative in the rotation. And Marcus, who is a plumber and does not traffic in speeches, had shrugged and said, "You don't unpick a kid because the grown-ups change their minds. Theo picked you." That's the whole thing. I put the phone away. But it stayed with me, sitting there across from a woman who kept bracing for me to unpick her daughter. "Sorry," I said. "Family thing. My nephew made a team up." "You have a nephew?" "Sort of. It's a long story with a lot of X's in it. He's 15. Not actually related to me anymore if you go by the paperwork." I heard how that sounded and shrugged. The paperwork doesn't get a vote, is my position. Nora looked at me for a beat too long. Then she looked at Lily, then back at me, and I watched her understand something or start to. She didn't say it. She just took a slow sip of her water, and her hand, I noticed, had stopped shaking. Lily set down her crayon. She sat back on her heels and studied the placemat with the fierce, unsatisfied squint of an artist who is 90% done and knows it. Then she picked the crayon back up and added one more thing, small in the corner. A little scribble. And she was finished. She turned the placemat around. Slid it across the table. Past the salt, past the fake candle, all the way to me, using both hands, careful, the way you move something that matters. "That's for you," she said. I looked down at it. 3 figures. Stick arms, stick legs, circle heads. Standing behind a rectangle that was clearly a table, because she'd drawn little plates on it, little red circles for plates. On the left, a tall one with a triangle for a dress. In the middle, a small one with the 2 lines of pigtails. And on the right, another tall one, and this one she'd given something the others didn't have. A shape in front of it. A row of little squares, black and white if you squinted, going up and down. A piano. She'd drawn me a piano. "That's you," Lily said, pointing at the figure with the keyboard. "Because you fixed them." "That's Mommy." "That's me." She pointed at each one, matter of fact, like she was reading me a receipt. Then she pointed at the little scribble in the corner, the last thing she'd added. "And that's Benjamin." "Who's Benjamin?" She held up the stuffed rabbit by one ear. "Benjamin." "Of course," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. "Can't have dinner without Benjamin." I looked at that drawing for longer than a drawing usually gets looked at. 3 people at a table. A woman I'd met an hour ago, a kid I'd met an hour ago, and me in wax with a piano nobody asked me to bring. She'd put me there. She'd sat with 2 grown-ups working out whether the evening would survive, and while we did that, she'd quietly done the math a 5-year-old does, and she'd added a 3rd chair to her own picture before either of us dared to. I've had people spend years failing to make me feel like I belonged somewhere. This kid did it with a red crayon in under an hour. "Lily," I said, "this is the best thing anybody's given me in a really long time." She looked pleased, and also like she'd expected as much, which is the correct way for a person to receive a compliment. Then she went back to Benjamin, arranging him against the water glass so he could see the table too. I looked up. Nora was watching me. And whatever had been guarded in her face all night, the readiness, the 1 foot at the door, it had gone somewhere. She wasn't bracing anymore. She was just looking at me, and there was something in it that was almost frightened, but the good kind of frightened. The kind where you'd started to believe a thing couldn't happen, and then it was happening at your own table, with fries getting cold. "You're not doing the thing," she said quietly. "What thing?" "The thing where you check your watch. Or your phone. Or you get real interested in the check." She swallowed. "The thing where a man realizes there's a kid, and the whole night turns into a countdown." "I'm not counting down," I said. "I can see that," she laughed, but it wobbled. "It's throwing me off completely. I had a whole plan for when you started counting down. I was going to make it easy for you. I'm very good at making it easy for people to leave. I've had a lot of practice." "I'll bet you have," I said. "You can stop, though. If you want. I'm not going anywhere." I meant it about the night. I want to be honest, I meant it about the next hour, the dinner, the fries. But it came out bigger than that, the way true things do when you're not guarding them. And it landed bigger than that, and neither of us corrected it. We just let it sit on the table, with the plates and the fake candle and the drawing. The burgers came. Lily's cut in half exactly, and she checked. We ate. The talk kept going, Easier now, the wall between the fun of it and the real of it just gone, dissolved somewhere around a red crayon. She told me a thing her ex had said the last time he'd met a man she was seeing, something small and cruel about her being a package deal, and instead of getting quiet, she made it funny. And I laughed, and she laughed at me laughing, and for a minute we were just two people who'd been left by other people, finding it hilarious that we'd both somehow survived it. That was the turn. I felt it happen. The night stopped being a favor I was doing a stranger and Priya. It stopped being an obligation I was too polite to run from. Somewhere between the burger and the last of the fries it became a thing I wanted, plainly, greedily, the way you want a warm room after a long time standing outside in the cold. When the plates were cleared, Lily had fallen into that heavy-eyed slump kids hit when the day catches up to them, chin propped on Benjamin, watching the kitchen doors swing for the fire she'd been promised. Nora started gathering things, reaching for her bag, and she picked up the drawing off the table. She folded it, carefully, along the middle, then again into a small square, slipping it into her coat pocket the way you keep the important things, and I understood she was going to take it home and put it on a fridge somewhere, and it would live there with the other things her daughter made. And I heard myself say, actually, could I have that? She stopped. This? The drawing. If Lily doesn't mind, I looked at the kid. Do you mind if I keep it? I don't have anything good on my fridge. Lily considered this from inside her sleepiness, then nodded, magnanimous. You can have it. I'll make Mommy another one. Nora unfolded it partway, then stopped, and looked at me, and I couldn't quite read what was in her face. She refolded it, careful, back into its small square. Then she reached across the table and put it in my hand, not on the table, in my hand, her fingers brushing my palm for a second, and I took it and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket, over the left side, the way you carry a thing you've already decided is yours. It sat there against my chest, that folded little square, the whole drive home and long after. The waiter came back around and asked, in the careful voice they use once a table has gone soft, whether anyone had room for dessert. Lily woke up like a switch had flipped. She'd been half asleep against Benjamin, and the word dessert brought her fully online, chin off the rabbit, eyes clear. Nora started to say it was late, we should probably, and Lily turned to her with the whole weight of 5 years of negotiation behind her, and Nora looked at me, and I gave the smallest shrug I own, the one that says your call, but I'm easy. So Nora sighed the sigh of a parent who has just lost cleanly and told the man 1 dessert, 3 spoons. They brought a chocolate thing in a bowl too big for it. Lily got the first spoon by decree. She ate with the focus of a surgeon, and between bites she narrated, telling us which parts were the best parts, ranking them. And Nora leaned back a little and let her kid run the table, and I watched a thing happen to her face. The shift a person makes when they stop performing okay and just get to be tired in front of somebody. She's going to crash hard in the car, Nora said, low, watching Lily excavate the good part. Worth it. You say that. You're not driving her. I'd drive her, I said, and then heard it, the size of it, and reached for my water. I mean, hypothetically. In a world where, she said, and smiled into her spoon, and let me hang there a second before she rescued me. That's a mercy, when somebody catches you saying too much and just lets it be sweet. We killed the dessert. Lily got the last bite, negotiated it actually, gave me a whole speech about how I'd had 2 and she'd only had, by her count, several. The math didn't hold up, but the closing argument was strong, so I conceded. She ate it looking directly at me, victorious, and I have not been that thoroughly defeated in years, and I don't think I've enjoyed losing more. Then the bill, the coats, the small chaos of leaving. Lily needed her shoes tied and her rabbit accounted for, and one last trip to look at the fish tank by the door, and by the time we spilled out onto the sidewalk, it was full dark and cold enough to see your breath. Nora had Lily on her hip now, the kid too heavy for it, and going anyway, arms around her mother's neck, cheek on her shoulder, already leaving the world. You don't have to walk us, Nora said. I know. I walked them anyway. The parking lot was around the side, under one of those lights that buzzes and can't decide if it's on. Our shoes were loud on the empty asphalt. Lily had gone heavy and quiet, that particular dead weight of a kid who's decided to trust the arms she's in. And in the walking, in the dark, with her daughter asleep between us and no more table to hide behind, something opened up. The night got honest. Can I tell you something? Nora said. She was looking straight ahead at the car, not at me. The sitter didn't exactly fall through. I kept my eyes on the pavement. Okay. I mean, she did. That part's true. My sister was going to take her and then Emma got sick and that's real, that happened. She shifted Lily higher. But I'd already almost canceled. Before that. Twice. I had the text typed out. Something came up. You know the one. The polite one that doesn't mean anything. I know the one. I've sent that text a lot. She laughed, soft, no bottom to it. It's a good text. Nobody can be mad at it. We reached the car. She didn't dig for her keys yet. She stood there with her kid asleep on her, breath fogging, and she told me the true thing. The way you can tell a person a true thing in a parking lot at night that you could never say across a table with the lights up. The last 3 times I got as far as the door, she said. Actual dates. Got dressed, got a sitter, drove there. And I sat in the car in the lot, and I did the thing where you already know how it ends. Because I know the exact face a man makes. There's a second, right when it comes up, when the daughter comes up, and their eyes do a little math. Some of them are nice about it. They finish the dinner. They text for a week. But you can see the math happen. You can watch a man add you up and land on too much. She said too much like it was a word she'd worn smooth. So a couple of times I saved us both the trip, she said. I sent the good text and I put Lily to bed and I told myself I'd rather be home anyway. And the thing is, I'm not lying when I say that. I would rather be home. Home is where I'm not being measured. Lily made a small sound in her sleep, and Nora rocked her without thinking about it, the automatic sway of a body that's been somebody's whole safety for 5 years. I almost didn't come tonight, she said. Not because of the sitter. The sitter gave me a clean reason, and I was so grateful for it I almost cried in the kitchen. A reason where it wasn't me. Where I didn't have to decide to spare myself. She finally looked at me. And then Emma got better a little, and Dana called back and said she could take her after all. And I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, and I had the good text typed out one more time. And I don't know why I deleted it. I really don't. I just did. And I grabbed Lily because there was no time to do anything else, and I drove here bracing the whole way for your face to do the math. The light buzzed. Somewhere a car door closed and an engine turned over. It didn't do the math, I said. No, her voice caught. It didn't. I should tell you what was happening on my side of that, because it wasn't nothing, and I'd be lying by leaving it out. Standing there, wanting to say something big and true back to her, I felt the old thing rise up. The wound has a voice, and its voice is reasonable. It said, careful. It said, you don't get to want this. A woman with a kid, a whole small life already built, a 5-year-old who draws you into her family in wax before you've earned a single hour of it. The voice said, what do you think you're doing? You're a guy who couldn't keep the marriage he had. You're going to walk into the middle of somebody's finished sentence and pretend you belong there. Wanting a ready-made family when you failed at making your own, that's just a man dressing up his loneliness as a gift and calling it love. That's borrowing a life you never had to build. I stood there with all of that going, and I didn't say any of it, and I hated that I couldn't tell whether keeping my mouth shut was decency or cowardice, because with me those two look identical from the inside. I have a version of that speech too, is what I said. The one you give yourself in the car. Do you? Different words. Same tune. I put my hands in my pockets and found the drive home cold in there and nothing else because the drawing was in my jacket over my heart. I knew exactly where it was without checking. Mine says I already had my shot. Marriage, house, the whole setup. And I couldn't hold it together. So the idea that I'd get to walk into something already this good and this real and just be handed it. Somebody else's kid who already knows how to be a family. It feels like cutting in line. Like I'd be getting something I didn't build and don't deserve. That's a mean thing to tell yourself, she said. So's yours. She was quiet. Then, yeah. Mine's meaner though. It's not a contest, I said, and she laughed wet and wiped her face on her shoulder because both her arms were full of sleeping child. We got Lily buckled. It's a whole operation, a car seat, more straps than a parachute, and Nora did it in the dark with the muscle memory of 10,000 nights. And Lily surfaced just long enough to say, did I have dessert? And Nora said, you had all of it, baby. And Lily said, good, and went back under. I stood by the open door, holding it against the wind, and I looked at that kid slumped in her seat, mouth open, rabbit crushed to her chest, completely and criminally trusting of a world that had given her, So far, a father who could be described in a joke about thoroughness, and I felt the protective thing land on me sideways, uninvited. Because here's what the honesty in that parking lot cost. It moved the question. All night the question had been the light one, the will they, the does he flinch. Standing there with the door open and the kid buckled in, it turned into the heavy one. I already knew I wanted this. What I didn't know was whether I got to. Whether a man should let a 5-year-old draw him a third chair when he isn't sure yet he can be trusted to stay in it. Because Lily was the one with everything to lose, and Lily was the one who'd already decided, in wax, before any of the grown-ups were brave enough to. And if I turned out to be another man doing math, I'd disappoint a woman who'd braced for it her whole adult life. Worse than that, I'd teach a kid that the bracing was right. I should get her home, Nora said. Yeah. We stood there another second, not doing that. Thank you, she said, for not making me use the good text. I mean it. It's been a while since a night went off script in a direction I liked. Same, I said. For the record. She got in. Rolled the window down halfway. Looked at me like she wanted to say a thing and picked a smaller thing instead. You've got my number. From when they set this up, a beat. You don't have to use it. I'm going to use it, I said. Okay, small surprised. Like she'd handed me one more chance to do the math and I'd declined again. Okay. I watched the taillights out of the lot. Then I sat in my own car for a while, before I turned the key, the way you do when a night's rearranged something, and you want to let it finish settling before you drive. At home I hung up the jacket and then took it back down. Reached into the inside pocket. Took out the folded square and opened it under the kitchen light, careful along the creases she'd made, and I looked at the three of them again. The tall one with the triangle dress. The small one with pigtails. The tall one with the piano nobody asked him to bring. Benjamin in the corner. Little red plates on the table. I'd looked at it in the restaurant and felt something warm. In my kitchen, alone, it hit deeper, because now I knew what she'd been carrying to that table, and I knew what she almost hadn't come to say, and I knew a kid had drawn a third chair while two grown-ups sat there too scared to. I stood there and understood that the drawing was a job offer. She'd sketched the position and put me in it before I applied. And the only real question left was whether I'd show up for it, all the way on the bad days too, or whether I'd take the warm feeling and keep the drawing on my fridge, like a souvenir of a nice night and never call. My phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus again. Good game tomorrow if you can make it. Theo asked twice. I looked at that for a long time. Then I typed, wide awake at midnight with a crayon drawing propped against the fruit bowl. Can I ask you something? How'd you know you weren't just pretending? With Theo. A kid that wasn't yours. The 3 dots came and went. Marcus is a slow texter, a plumber's thumb. Finally it came through, and it was long for him. You don't know. That's the trick. Nobody knows. You just keep showing up on the days it's inconvenient, and one day you look up and it's not a decision anymore, it's just your kid. The pretending is when you only show up for the easy parts. Then, a second later, why? You meet somebody with kids? I looked at the drawing. 3 figures. A table. A chair drawn for me before I'd earned it. Yeah, I typed back. I think I did. Good, he wrote. Come to the game then. Bring your head on straight. I put the phone down. I hadn't told him a single detail. He knew anyway, because he'd watched me do the math on smaller things for 2 years. Watched me talk myself out of anything that might cost me, in the name of being reasonable, in the name of not deserving it. Marcus had never once done the math on me. A divorced almost relative, a man with no claim on his family whatsoever, and he'd kept a chair at the table for me for 2 years, plain as breathing, because you don't unpick a person just because the paperwork changed. He'd been showing me the answer the whole time. I'd just been too busy protecting myself to read it. I taped the drawing to my fridge. It was the only thing on it. Then I stood there in the quiet and thought about a woman who'd typed 100 versions of the good text, the one nobody can be mad at, the one that spares everybody the trouble of her. A woman so practiced at being left that she'd learned to leave first gently so it wouldn't count. And I thought, she's going to spend the next few days waiting for the flinch. Waiting for the follow-up that never comes, or comes cool, comes busy, comes with the slow fade she's been trained to read from a mile off. She was going to brace. It's the only thing she knew how to do at a moment like this. brace and pre-forgive me, and get her good text ready for whenever I did the thing that men do. I stood in my kitchen at midnight and decided she'd braced for the last time on my account. The next time I saw her, I was going to hand her the one thing she never let herself expect from anybody: a reason to stop. The thing about a decision made at midnight is that you have to survive until morning to act on it. I did. Barely. I called her the next afternoon. She answered on the fourth ring, and I could hear a cartoon going somewhere behind her, and a small voice asking whose it was. "It's a man," Nora said, half to me, half to Lily. Then to me, careful, "Hey." I asked if I could come by. Not to dinner out, not to a restaurant with 3 menus and a waiter counting our silences. To her place. On a Tuesday. A regular, unremarkable Tuesday, with homework and bath time, and whatever ordinary chaos filled her evenings. There was a pause long enough that I thought I'd misjudged the whole thing. "Daniel," she said finally, "Tuesdays are not my best self. I want to be honest with you. Tuesdays are lunches to pack, and a kid who won't sleep, and me in the same sweatshirt I wore yesterday." "I know," I said. "You don't, actually. That's kind of the point." "Then let me." Another pause. Then the sound of her exhaling, the way you do when you set something down that's been heavy in your hands for a while. "Okay," she said. "Come at 6 then. I make no promises about the state of the living room, and there will be macaroni. You've been warned twice now." I wrote down the address she gave me on the back of a receipt. I read it 4 times on the drive over, even though I'd already memorized it. That's the kind of thing you do when a thing matters, and you don't trust yourself to be steady. I stopped at a corner store on the way and stood in the bread aisle for 10 minutes like a man defusing a bomb, because I didn't know what kind of bread a family like hers ate, and I badly wanted to get it right. I bought the soft kind, the kind a kid would like. Then I bought a second loaf, the nice seeded kind, in case I'd guessed wrong. I brought both. Her apartment smelled like butter and crayons. Lily met me at the door before Nora could, planted herself in the gap like a very small bouncer, and looked up at me with a seriousness that could stop traffic. "Did you bring the drawing back?" she said. Not hello. No smile. Just that, the question she'd asked me twice already in the weeks I'd known her, the one I kept turning away from because I didn't have a good answer yet. I crouched down so we were level. "I still have it," I told her. "It's safe. I promise. But I want to ask you something first, if that's all right." She considered this with the gravity of a judge. "Okay. When you drew the 3 people at the table," I said, "who were they?" She looked at me like I'd asked what color the sky was. "You and Mommy and me," she said. "We were having dinner. Everyone was staying. Everyone was staying." I've thought about that phrase more times than I can count. A 6-year-old summed up in 3 words what a marriage counselor spent 18 months failing to get across to me and my ex-wife. The whole of it. The entire dream a kid holds without knowing it's a dream. A table where the people at it stay. I felt Nora behind me before I heard her. She'd come to the doorway of the little kitchen with a dish towel over her shoulder, and she was watching us with an expression I'd only seen on her once, that first night, when the door swung open and she braced for me to be gone. She was braced now. Standing in her own home, in her own doorway, holding a dish towel, waiting for the sound of me making an excuse. I stood up and told her the pasta smelled incredible, and asked where I could put the bread I'd brought. She blinked, like the ordinariness of the question had caught her off guard. Then she pointed at the counter and told me the butter was in the door of the fridge. Dinner was macaroni, exactly as promised, and it was some of the best food I've had in my adult life. Lily narrated everything. The correct way to eat noodles, the injustice of bedtime, a comprehensive review of every kid in her class ranked by how well they shared. Nora and I traded looks over the top of her head, the kind of look that used to feel like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. There was a moment, maybe halfway through, where Lily knocked her cup over. Just tipped it, the way kids do, and a little river of apple juice ran toward the edge of the table. And I watched Nora's whole body tense, a flinch that had nothing to do with the juice. She was waiting to see how the man would react. Whether the mess would be the thing that broke the spell. I grabbed a napkin and mopped it up and told Lily that when I was her age, I once knocked over an entire pitcher of lemonade at my grandmother's, on the good carpet, at a funeral. Lily thought this was the greatest story ever told. She made me say it again, slower, with the part about my grandmother's face. Then she wanted to know if I got in trouble, and I said I got a cookie instead, because my grandmother said a funeral could use a little chaos, and Lily nodded like this, confirmed something she'd long suspected about grandmothers. And across the table, Nora let out a breath she'd been holding since the cup went over. She caught me noticing. She looked away first. After, Nora ran the bath and I did the dishes. I didn't ask to. I just found the sponge and started, and when she came back into the kitchen and saw me there, elbow deep in a sink of macaroni pots, she stopped in the doorway again. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," I said. And I kept doing it. She came and stood next to me at the sink, close enough that our arms touched, and she picked up a towel to dry. "Can I tell you something?" I said, "and you let me get all the way through it before you decide I'm out of my mind." She almost smiled. That's an alarming way to start a sentence. I've been trying to figure out how to say this for weeks. I kept rehearsing it, and every version came out sounding like a speech, and you don't need a speech. You've had men give you speeches. So I'm just going to say the plain thing. I put the last pot in the rack. I turned to look at her. "I want the Tuesdays," I said. "The sweatshirt and the packed lunches, and the kid who won't sleep. I want the whole thing. This version of you. The one at the sink at 7 o'clock with mac and cheese in her hair." She reached up, self-conscious, and there was in fact a small orange smear near her temple. "I'm choosing all three of you," I said. "You and Lily and the Tuesdays. I'm here on the inconvenient nights. I'll be here on the inconvenient nights." That's the part I came to say. When the sitter cancels, and the car won't start, and everything's gone sideways. That's exactly when I want to be the guy standing in your kitchen. She went very still. I watched her look for the trick in it. That's the thing nobody tells you about spending years being left. It builds a muscle. You learn to scan a kind moment for the fine print, because you've read the fine print before, and it always said the same thing. "People say things like that," she said quietly. "At the sink. With the good lighting. And then it's a random Thursday and their car won't start, and suddenly the whole arrangement is very complicated." "I rebuild pianos," I said. "You know what that job is. It's 10,000 small, boring, invisible things nobody claps for. Nobody sees the felt and the pins and the 6 hours of tuning. They just hear it sound right and they walk away. I'm good at the invisible part. The Tuesday part. It's the only part I've ever really been good at." Her eyes went bright at the edges. She didn't let it fall. She held it the way she held everything, with both hands quietly, so nobody else would have to deal with it. "Lily asked you about the drawing," she said. "She did. She asks everybody. Every man I've ever brought around. Did you bring the drawing back? It's her test. Nobody's ever passed it." She laughed, a small wet sound. "You kept it in your jacket." She noticed. She notices everything. "I found her checking your pocket at the restaurant, that first night, when you got up to pay. Everyone was staying," I said. That's what she told me the picture was. Nora put the towel down on the counter. "That's a lot to ask a person to be," she said. "You're not asking. I'm offering, Doc." There was no grand gesture. I didn't hold up a sign in the rain. I didn't hire a string quartet. What I did was dry a kid's hair with a towel that had a cartoon dinosaur on it, because Nora asked me to while she answered a work email, and Lily sat on the edge of the tub and told me I was doing it wrong, and I said, "Show me the right way," and she did. She was very patient with me. She said I would get better with practice. Then she asked if I'd be there to do it again next week, and I said yes, and she said okay in the flat, businesslike way kids use when they've decided a thing is settled and there's no more point discussing it. That's it. That's the whole gesture. Courage doesn't always look like the movies. Sometimes it's a man deciding, on a Tuesday, in a small apartment that smells like butter, that he's going to keep showing up. Deciding it out loud, where it can be held against him later. And then doing the towel and the dishes, and the packed lunches, and the bath, over and over, until the woman at the sink stops flinching when he says he'll be there. Nora braced for the last time that night. I don't mean she never got scared again. She did. So did I. Being chosen doesn't erase the years that taught you not to expect it. But something in her shoulders let go, standing in that kitchen, and it didn't come back the same way. She stopped scanning for the exit. She started, slowly, to believe the man would still be in the room in the morning. Which he was. Which he is. Let me take you forward. Because the crayon drawing has one more thing to do. By the following spring, we were in a house. Small, a little crooked, with a porch that needed work and a kitchen big enough for 3. We're not rich. The porch still needs work, honestly. But there's a room off the hallway where I keep the pianos I'm rebuilding, and there's a corner of the living room that's all lilies, and there's a wall by the front door where Nora hangs the things that matter. The first thing that went up on that wall was Lily's drawing. I'd carried it in my jacket for months. Folded and refolded so many times the crayon had started to flake at the crease. Nora found a frame for it, one of those simple black ones, and she pressed the paper as flat as it would go, and we hung it at Lily's eye level, right where she'd see it every day coming and going. 3 stick figures at a table. Wobbly. One tall with brown scribbles for hair, one with a long yellow braid, one small with an enormous smile that takes up half the head. A table drawn as a straight line with 4 legs going the wrong direction, 3 plates on top of it, and every one of the little people staying right where she'd put them. Lily is 7 now, and she walks past that drawing a dozen times a day and never looks at it, the way you never look at the things that are just true. It's furniture to her at this point. It's the plain fact of her life. But I look at it. Every morning I come out of the piano room, and there it is by the door. The picture a lonely little girl drew on a paper placemat to keep herself busy while the grown-ups decided whether the night would end early. She drew what she wanted before she'd learned you weren't supposed to want it out loud. She drew a table where people stayed. And then she waited for somebody to notice. I noticed. I put it in my jacket. And it took me a good long while to understand that the drawing was never a picture of what she was hoping for. It was an invitation. And I said yes. There's a thing I've learned, and I'll give it to you plain, the way I've tried to give you everything else in this story. When you choose a person, you choose their whole life. All of it. The child at the table, and the fear at the door, and the sweatshirt they've worn 2 days running. You take the easy nights and the hard ones as the same deal, because they are the same deal. A woman and her daughter were always a family sitting at a table Lily drew, waiting for a 3rd plate to mean something. They deserved a man who came to the table on purpose and stayed there because he wanted to be there. Staying is quiet. It doesn't make a sound. Nobody claps for the man who does the dishes on a Tuesday for the 400th time. But it's the bravest thing I've ever done, and I do it again tomorrow, and I get to, because tomorrow happens to be a Tuesday. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone brace for you to leave? Braced so hard, for so long, that they'd already written the ending before you got the chance to write a different one? And have you ever been the one who stayed, when everyone before you found a reason not to? Tell me your story in the comments. I read them. I always do. And if you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.